Hello friends, Namaskar. I am Dr. Ashish Shah for Samagya. Today we are going to take a very interesting subject. And what is that? Today we will compare the different approaches and the preparation between President Trump and President Putin when they met in Alaska on 15th of August. So how did the two leaders fared and what is the difference between their negotiation style? Okay. So let's start the discussion. Now before we start the discussion, let's see what are the essentials of a negotiation. The first point, whenever you talk about negotiation, is that who is talking from a point of seat of strength and who is talking from a weaker position. This is very important, right? Because the person who is talking from a higher seat or seat of power and strength will dominate and will try to win the negotiation talk, while the person who is in a weaker position will try to defend his position. Also, it's important to know that what leverages both the leaders have against each other. So this is very important whenever there is a negotiation between two leaders. The leaders can be company heads or state heads or whosoever. So in this negotiation that happened on 15th August, we have to see who was at a higher seat of strength and who was in a weaker position and what leverages they had against each other. Besides, one has to also see the body language of the two leaders, the preparation they have done for the negotiations, and the overall knowledge that they possess inherently for the topic under discussion of the negotiation. So these 3-4 points are very important whenever you try to compare the negotiation of two parties. First, let's start with the body language. If you have observed both the leaders, you can easily observe that while President Trump was tense and anxious, President Putin was just normal, if I don't say relaxed and happy. He was behaving very normal with his smiles and other things, while President Trump was clearly just short of nervous, you can say. His tension was palpable, you can see on his face, and he was quite anxious also. Though he has given an interview on the flight from Washington DC to Alaska, but still one could have seen that he was tense. So that is the first difference between the two leaders. Now, having said about the body language, let us try to see about the preparation that has gone for the negotiation by the two leaders. Here again, President Putin comes out as a winner because Putin has a KGB training for many years. Now KGB, as you know, is a very thorough spy agency which trains its agents very well, right? While President Trump was a business leader, a business tycoon, dealing in property matters, buying and selling properties, and excels basically in bluffs like thing to score point over his opponent, right? So we can see that President Putin was thoroughly prepared for this negotiation, while President Trump relied on his own instinct and skills to deal with the negotiation with Putin. Right. Next comes the point about the knowledge about the topic in question. The territory was, of course, Ukraine and of course Russia, where Russia was one of the party. So no need to say that Russia knew the territory as well as the issues very well as compared to President Trump. First of all, the territory Ukraine was foreign to President Trump. He may have visited Ukraine, he may have read about Ukraine, but still he knew less about Ukraine than President Trump. It is as obvious as it can be. Also, the issues involved, President Trump, being a first party to it, knew much more in depth than President Trump. Right? So here again, we can say that President Putin was in a better position than President Trump. Right. Now with these 3 points, right, we can safely say that President Putin was negotiating from a higher seat of strength, while President Trump was negotiating from a lower. And hence one can see the tenseness and anxiety on President Trump's face. Also, it's important to understand that Putin is in no hurry for a ceasefire. Right? For him, the war, he can continue the war for another 6 months, 1 year, or whatever. While President Trump wanted to leave his legacy, maybe go for a Nobel Peace Prize, and wanted this Russia-Ukraine war to end as soon as possible. And that's why he was building pressure through various means, including penalizing India for buying Russian oil, right, which was rather absurd in our opinion. So, President Putin had more leverages compared to President Trump. What leverage President Trump had? President Trump, if any, had the leverage to put more sanctions against President Putin and basically Russia, right? Besides that, he doesn't have any other leverage, right? While President Putin, just by continuing the war, could have given more sleepless nights to not only America but also to European Union countries as well as Ukraine. Also note that President Putin walked towards Trump quite cheerfully with a smile on his face, and President Trump also greeted him by clapping. So this was also very important, and President Putin cheered or pampered President Trump with some very positive statements. That was basically to boost the ego of President Trump, because everyone knows that President Trump has a weakness for being praised, right? So this is also important point for a negotiation skill. Thus overall we see that during this meeting at Alaska on 15th August, President Putin was a winner as against President Trump, and most likely he was able to get the deal he wanted. Though the deal is not yet confirmed, but basically President Putin has said that they would like to keep all the areas that they have captured during this 3.5-year war, plus some more areas that they would like to keep. It will be interesting to see how this goes through when the three leaders, that is President Putin, Zelensky, and President Trump, meet very soon to finalize the deal for ceasefire and peace. On the other side, President Trump has not got anything substantial out of this negotiation, right? The only thing which they got was Russia will not attack Ukraine again. So again, these are all proposals. The final endorsement of this will come when the three leaders meet and subsequently through some other procedures. So a lot of books have been written on the art of negotiation and it's not possible to sum up the whole negotiation table in a short video like this. But there is one more essential thing that I would like to take up when we talk about the negotiation. There is this X factor that always being used by the opposite parties during a negotiation. And what is that X factor? The X factor can be element of surprise. It can be something that is not expected, maybe a positive data or fact or something. So one has to see this X factor also during any negotiation skill. So when you see this meeting between President Trump and President Putin at Alaska, there are a few things that we have to see from the X or the surprise element. See, President Putin talked about the Russian legacy in Alaska. As we know that Alaska was part of Russia and was given to US for merely $1 or something like that way back. I think that was in the 19th century. And so President started with that. President Putin started with this this anecdote and by saying that he wants to reinvite this legacy of between Russia and America. On the other side, President Trump had used his wife to hand over letter written by his wife to President Putin, where they talked about the children that are being kidnapped, that are supposed to be allegedly kidnapped by Russians. So that was so these two, you see, are the X factors that were used by the opponents to have some point scored on the other party. So this is also very important and one has to remember that. With that, we'll end today's podcast. Hope you liked it, and if you have liked it, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.